In a world where kingdoms fall and stars still remember names, this song was forged from magic memory and the dream that refused to die. Welcome to a tale where wonder still breathes. This story is entitled Wheein's Wildflower Choir, a fantasy of love, song, and blooming magic created by Jesus Pacampara. If this tale stirred something in you, a memory, a dream, or a truth, our Ko-fi, Amazon, and Patreon links are in the description. Support helps us keep writing for you and the ones you hold dear. The sky had forgotten how to weep. The clouds hung above like dried husk, brittle and stubborn, casting no shadow and offering no relief. The wind, stripped of grace, swept dust in spirals over dead grass and limp stalks, as though mocking what was once alive. Trees stood like mourners, leafless even in summer. Nothing sang, not even birds, and still she hummed. He had not meant to find her, not then, not like that. Just stood hidden beneath a gnarled bough, soaked in the silence of a world that had gone quiet. His breath caught not from magic, though there was plenty, but from memory stirring in his ribs. For a moment, he was not a king, not a creature of myth or realms or duty, just a man watching a girl hum to a dying marigold like it was sacred, watching the marigold answer her back. And there she was, Wheein, the first voice in the first bloom. He saw her days with her sisters later. Buell, fierce and sharp-eyed, lifting her chin at him like the world dared him to speak. She stood at Wheein's side like a blade in its scabbard, silent, steady, necessary. And Yongsun. The wind shifted when Yongsun entered the clearing. Jess had seen fairies born of starlight, gods made of smoke and fire, but nothing compared to her presence. Quiet but unshakable, like dusk itself had chosen to wear a woman's face. He hadn't known back then how far he'd follow them, how love would not strike all at once, but unfold slow as dawn over frost-kissed hills. But in that moment when the marigold lifted, when the wind curled around Wheein's song, when the three women stood in defiance of a world that had stopped blooming, Jess knew that in his heart, like the field, had been barren for too long, and now rain had come. The sky refused to cry, but the flowers did. The trees clung to withered petals, sunburned and curled at the edges. The wind carried no promises, only dust and silence, and in that silence Wheein hummed. She was small then, still barefoot and unbothered by the weight of the world, wandering a dying meadow where no one else dared to linger. Her village, too poor to waste hope, had stopped visiting the fields after the last rains vanished. But Wheein went, day after day, sitting among the brittle stems like they were friends she couldn't leave behind. One afternoon, with the wind still warm, but the earth already cracking beneath her, she found a single marigold clinging to life. It drooped, bent under its own fading color. Wheein, barely more than a child, cradled its head in her palms and sang not a song she had learned, but something buried deep within her, something that made of memory and yearning. And the marigold lifted. So did the others one by one. They stared, their petals trembled, the breeze picked up, soft now, and Wheein's hum rippled outward. A heartbeat made of sound, the meadow began to sing. She didn't know she had magic, she only knew that the flowers listened. Meanwhile, far beyond the boundaries of mortal land, a man sat in a palace too grand to be called beautiful. Just the fair king wore a crown spun of moonstone and frost, but it lay discarded beside his throne. The walls of his court shimmered with shifting light, and the music that played there was composed by stars, but it no longer moved him. He sat beneath glassy branches woven with dream vines and heard nothing but perfection, the kind that leaves no space for joy. He longed for something real, something that could break the quiet ache inside his chest. And then he heard her. At first, it was no more than breath on the wind, a voice carried across the veil between realms, but it didn't fade. It grew, twined with the music of the wild, of rivers and roots and petals unfurling. He left that same night, his cloak trailing moonlight, his feet carrying him, not as a king, but as a man who needed to remember how to feel. He found her where the forest met the meadow, Wheein, now older, humming beneath the sun. Flowers gathered at her feet like disciples. The air shimmered with invisible harmony. He stepped forward and said, "Your songs wake even the roots beneath the frost." His voice slow and reverent. She turned, startled. Her eyes met his. Deep green, full of weariness and wonder. "It's not me," she whispered. "They've always known how to sing." But he knew the truth. She was the reason they remembered. The next day he returned not alone. Her sisters, Buell, tall and fierce-eyed, and Young-soon, radiant in the quiet way sunlight lingers on skin, joined her in the clearing. Jess brought them each a flower from his realm. To Buell he gave a spiral of frost and steel, a bloom forged in winter's fire. To Young-soon, a flame-colored blossom that pulsed like a heartbeat. To Wheein he offered the wildflower of every youth, a petal for each note she had ever sung. "These do not fade," Jess said, his voice like wind brushing velvet, "so long as the hands that hold them belong to hearts that love." The meadow held its breath, and then, just like that, the wind exhaled, and the sisters stepped forward. They left at dawn, the cottage behind them with its creaky floors, sun-warmed blankets, and patched roof that leaked in 3 different places. They remained quiet, almost shy in farewell. It didn't know how to say goodbye, and neither did they. The forest greeted them, not like a place, but a story opening its first page. The roots seemed to breathe, the air shimmered like it remembered when the world was young. Wheein was first to notice that the trees leaned slightly as they walked, not aggressively, more like shy dancers adjusting their posture to make room. Buell squinted upward, ever watchful. "They're listening," she muttered. Young-soon tilted her head, listening too. "No, they're humming," and they were. The deeper they walked, the more the wild bent around them. The fox with purr like burning embers stepped into their path. Its eyes glowed the color of twilight. It didn't speak, not in words, but Wheein knelt, and it bowed. She hummed a single note, and the fox vanished into the petals. Further still, they came upon a brook where the water ran sideways. It flowed up a mossy arc instead of under it. "Water that remembers wishes," Jess said, dipping his hands into the current. "Drink it, and you'll dream of the life you've left behind." They did not drink, but they did dream. Moth like lights floated down from the trees, lanterns made of wind and silk, pulsing with a rhythm that matched their footsteps. One landed in Young-soon's open palm. It stayed. It would never leave her. At one point, the forest reshaped itself entirely. The path vanished. Trees stood in new places, their shadows moving faster than the sun. It became a maze, an illusion. Voices echoed softly, somehow loving, some accusing, all too familiar. "I failed her," a voice whispered near Buell's ear. "You'll never be enough," one said to Young-soon in her own voice. "You only sing because you're scared of silence," a whisper told Wheein, but they didn't run. Wheein sang softly, a lullaby without words. Buell held his sister's hand and stepped forward. Young-soon closed her eyes and walked toward the sound of Jess's heartbeat, and the illusion broke. The trees stepped aside, the sun returned. At the edge of the ridge, a world cracked open in wonder. The valley below wasn't part of any map, mortal or otherwise, Gardens that bloomed in slow motion and bridges that spun from starlight and vine. Lanterns floated along wind streams like fireflies following a song. Yongsun was first to speak. "Is this real?" she asked, her voice no louder than the wind. Jess looked at her not as a king, not as a guide, but as someone who had walked alone for too long. His gaze softened, as if the very question had been echoing him for years. "It is now." Life in the kingdom did not come with crowns. The sister did not become ornaments. They became anchors. Buell taught swordplay to creatures of light and bark. Yongsun tended kitchens where fairy chefs learned the warmth of mortal stews. Wheein planted a new garden, part wild, part curated, a meeting of her world and his. And every night, Jess would find his way to Wheein's side. "I can tell where kingdom ends and your heart begins," she told him once. He smiled, fingers brushing hers, and says, "It ends with you." One night, the sisters gathered on a high balcony. The stars hung low like fruit, and the wind smelled of wild herbs and magic. "Do you miss it?" Wheein asked. "Sometimes," Yongsun said, "the scent of wet earth and the quiet of an empty room." Buell nodded, the sound of the door creaking when the wind hits right. Wheein looked out over the glowing hills. "I miss the way we used to hold each other when the roof leaked." "But I don't miss the hunger," Buell added softly. Yongsun smiled faintly, or the loneliness. Wheein said nothing, she only hummed, the same hum from that drought-born meadow, and the garden below them bloomed in response. The wedding was held beneath a wildflower arc. The guests came from both realms, spirits in smoked silk robes and villagers in hand-me-downs. The music was terrifying at once. A trembling flute, a giddy drum, a wind chime laugh. Jess took Wheein's hand and said, "You made the world sing again," he told her. Yongsun and Buell stood beside her, holding flowers that never had wilted. The moment their vows were spoken, the forest exhaled. Trees bloomed out of season, the river hummed, the fox curled at the edge of the clearing and closed its eyes. Later, under a tree by the lantern, moths, Jess and Wheein danced slowly, her cheek against his chest, his hands in the small of her back. Yongsun and Buell joined them, barefoot in the soft grass, their laughter rising like fireflies. The marigold from the meadow stood tall in the garden nearby. It lifted its head once more, not from sorrow, not from desperation, but in pure blooming joy. And the flowers sang again, not for rain, not for mercy, but for love. Forever the wood remembered the girl who hummed and the king who listened. In a world of magic and moonlight, the wildflower choir would never sleep again. The garden shimmered with joy, not the loud kind, but the kind that blooms gently, in colors richer than the world had names for. Trees bent like they were bowing, petals spun in the air, not as confetti, but like blessings caught mid-prayer. And somewhere near the edge of the clearing, a single marigold bloomed, no longer needing to be lifted, but lifting others in return. It did not sing to be saved. It sang because it remembered what it meant to belong. Jess stood where his heart had always been drawn, between Wheein's hand and Yongsun's laughter, between Buell's silent strength and the hush that flowers make when they listen. Lantern moths circled overhead, gentle as breath, scattering light into the arms of the trees. Rivers murmured like old lullabies. The windflower choir sang in full voice, not out of pain, but of promise. And Jess remembered the drought, not with sorrow, but with gratitude, because that silence had brought him here, where love didn't just survive the drought, it transformed it. And somewhere through the hush, the marigold sang, not last, but longest, not as a farewell, but as a forever, a forever. I create these stories, poems and little worlds each day for my beloved Wheein. If they bring you comfort or a smile too, please give it a like, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe to join us on this little journey.